So nearby, Brad and Nisha, as I pour myself some of this, what's left of this, what is your favourite bad line reading in a movie?
Oh, bad line reading.
You know what? Maybe have a think about it and we'll talk about it at the end of the video.
Trolls, hasn't it?
Yeah, have a think, and audience at home, you do the same thing.
I mean, I want to say Troll 2, but I talk about it so much.
But the thing is, it's always worth putting in because that gives me an excuse to just go, oh, hi, Mark.
I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Or I don't know what the film is, but that one where that guy's on the beach reading that letter from his wife who's left him. He's like,
oh, no.
Oh, God, oh, man,
oh, man, oh, God.
Oh, man. Oh, God, oh, man.
At the time, the original article I'm reading from here, which is admittedly from 2020, there are about 7 known versions of the film Blade Runner, and most of them have been criticised, including by director Ridley Scott himself, for being kind of shit. Do you know about this? Like, it's infamously one of the most, like, recut films ever. And perhaps no version is more controversial than the one that Harrison Ford himself personally sabotaged. Allegedly. Today we're talking about the 1982 United States theatrical release of Blade Runner, which is infamous among fans of the film and of film in general, given, like, you know, Blade Runner's current status as, you know, a classic. And are you familiar with Blade Runner? You've watched Blade Runner?
I've seen Blade Runner, I've not seen the sequel.
Well, that's the thing, which version? Because, like I said, there's 7.
It was a while back, I don't know.
Like, it's one of those
you
films.
said they're all shit, so I've clearly not watched them.
No, that's the thing. Some of them, there's about 7 versions, and I think 2 of them are good. There's like a director's cut, but then there's like a director's recut. Then there's an extended cut. Then there's a theatrical cut. Then there's like the work print, which is like 3.5 hours long. Like, I think the YouTuber H Bomber Guy did a great video on it, where he talks about how many versions of the film exist and like the multitude of changes that are within them. And it's a really interesting thing to discuss because it's like, well, which version of the film is the right one?
This caused Warner Brothers to begin work on a proper director's cut. Well, not actually a director's cut. Someone else was put in charge of doing it, and Scott just got to provide notes and consult on it.
Why are there so many?
Just the director didn't like what the studio did. And that's the question that H Bomber Guy asked in that video. Like, well, who does the film belong to? Like, is it the director's film? Is it the writers? Is it the studio who financed it? Is it us, the audience? Like, if we recut it and do our stuff with it? And that's, to me, is a really interesting philosophical conversation, but also, you know, as a fan of media in general, it's like, well, which version is the real one? Like, you know, the proper one, so we can talk about it. Like, think about Star Wars. Like, which version of Star Wars is the real version of Star Wars?
I think we talked about it. There's so many, like, even the theatrical versions were different because they changed the audio.
Yeah, I believe it's a video we recorded before we changed the format, so it never got edited. And one of the things we talk about in that video is that nobody out there can claim to have seen the original Star Wars because George Lucas was making edits to it while it was in cinemas. Like, they were making changes to that film while it was in the cinema. So you could have people who went to see the film at different ends of the country, ostensibly going to see the same film, but would have a radically different experience. And that to me is very interesting. Like, so which of those 2 people saw Star Wars? Or did they both see Star Wars? It's like, you know, it's like a metaphorical media ship of Theseus, isn't it? Like, which is the true version?
Like, that's just made me remember, like, when I was a child. You know when you just think things when you're younger,
Yeah.
you realise it doesn't really make sense. Like, when I was younger, I used to think when films came out in cinemas, they were still being edited on. And, like, the editors were rushing to
Well, they kind of were. In the case of Star Wars, they kind of were. Like,
Yeah,
George
obviously.
Lucas, he was changing special effects, he was changing the sound effects, he was changing the opening title crawl, he was adding and inserting new scenes, like, you know, for different, like, you know, formats.
This is more common now with digital distribution as well. I know there was the big thing about Across the Spider-Verse having different variations of shots.
Yep.
So you can argue with that, which one's the real movie? What's the right shot? Are they both right?
And in regards to Blade Runner, the theatrical cut mention is widely regarded as the worst version of the film because it features something almost no other version of the film contains, and that is a happy ending, which director Ridley Scott did not like because the ending of the film is supposed to be ambiguous because it's a noir film. Also, because sometimes movies just don't have satisfying conclusions. That's kind of the point. And the story goes that the studio repeatedly just bitched out Ridley Scott of like, well, what does the ending mean? It's like, it's open to interpretation. It's like, okay, that's fine, but what does it mean? It's like, it's open to interpretation. It's like, okay, yeah, but what does it mean?
It's kind of like with The Thing.
Yep.
Why don't we just wait here for a little while? See what happens.
Like, who's possessed? Like, it's up to you.
Who do you think was possessed? Yeah, I want to inspire a conversation.
Who was it though?
Or like, think about like Christopher Nolan, like all the shit he got over the ending to Inception. Like, is it a dream or not? And it's like, well, do you think it is? Well, I think it is, yeah, but what is it though? It's like, the fact you're having this conversation with me is the point. I want you to talk about it. I want people to walk away from the film and discuss what they took from it, because I'm an artist creating art. I want my art to elicit a response.
Yeah, I think adding a happy ending on isn't inherently bad, because I think Shawshank, the ending where they're on the beach, wasn't in the original book.
No, but Stephen King really did like that.
Yeah, but there's obviously situations where, like in a film like Blade Runner, where it's supposed to be more ambiguous.
Yeah, and that was like,
supposed to know.
It was also the original intent of what they were doing, and they also have, most pertinent to today's video, a voiceover throughout the film, because another note that Ridley Scott kept getting is like, what's going on? It's like, well, watch the film. It's like, no, but what's going on? It's like, watch the fucking film. And do you like when you watch a film like your mum or your dad? Or like, and they're just like, and bless, they're watching it, but like, my dad does this a lot. I love your dad, but unless you're watching like Jurassic Park, he's like, what's going on here? So it's like, I don't know, we're watching the same movie. It's like, I've seen this, we've got the same information. What insight do you think I have that you don't? Watch the film.
My stepdad always, like, we watch stuff like films, obviously, they're not real, like, they're exaggerated.
Yes.
A lot of stuff is far-fetched. Like, we'll watch a film that's clearly far-fetched, exaggerated, and he's like, well, that wouldn't happen in real life.
It's like, no, it's a movie.
Well, I would have done that.
The studio execs, though, just kept sitting on Ridley Scott, so like, so what's going on? I was like, watch the fucking film. And the story goes that they had a test screening that was disastrous, because they let the wider American public watch it, and their chief complaint is, I don't know what's going on. And it's like, well, why don't you try watching the film? Because that's the thing, I am a big proponent of media literacy being something people should absolutely be taught, because the absolute lack of it in today's society is infuriating as someone who's studied media. Like, I literally have a degree in breaking down and studying media. It's not that hard. That's why I picked the degree.
Although, like, when I did media studies in college...
Everyone thinks it's a DOS course, because, like, well, you're just watching TV. And then the amount of people, like, watch TV and go, what's going on?
You know what annoys me, right? I got A's and B's on my practical side of media, which was good, but I kept failing the theory exam. I just could not talk about scenes. I just couldn't do it. I just kept failing. I did it, like, 3 times.
I refer to it as the cinema sins effect, of, like, people don't watch movies to engage with them on anything more than a complete surface level. And it's just a shame.
Yeah, like, one of the biggest, like, crimes of cinema sins is when they'll just reference something else. So they can't even stay in the film they're in.
Or it's people, like, you know, knowing what tropes are. It's like, well, that's a trope. It's like, well, yeah, tropes exist for a reason. Like, you know, they're common storytelling devices. Is it being used well? Well, no, it's a trope. It's like, yeah, but how is it being used? Like, what's the purpose of using that trope? And it's like, you know, it's a tool in the filmmaker's arsenal. Do you think it's being used well? Could it be used better? Is it being used incorrectly? Is it being used as subversion of what the trope is? And like, well, I don't know. I just know it's a thing. And it's like, I guess that's the thing. You don't want to talk about the film. You just want people to think that you have an insight, but you don't. Anyway, both the happy ending and Harrison Ford's narration over the film.
I can't hear happy ending without hearing something else.
Okay, well, the happy ending and the narration were added without Ridley Scott's or Harrison Ford's, like, you know, knowledge.
I thought Harrison Ford did the narration.
He did, but he was assured that, you know, we're just going to do it just in case. Do it just in apparently they went to, like, the premiere, watched the film and got really mad that it was there. Because Harrison Ford hated it and Ridley Scott fucking hated it.
That was my profession. Ex-cop. Ex-Blade Runner. Ex-killer.
It had been tacitly agreed between the studio, Warner Bros., and Ridley Scott that while they would record an entire commentary track with Harrison Ford talking. It would be used sparingly throughout the film, just to, explain the bits that were a bit confusing for test audiences and the studio executives. And it was Ridley Scott was told that, the film will ultimately feature little to no narration. And then when the theatrical version came out, it's narrated the entire time.
I didn't know whether Leon gave Holden a legit address, but it was the only lead I had, so I checked it out.
And not only is this very funny, it ended up ruining the film because it's a noir film, it's a detective film. You're supposed to not know what's going on some of the time because the character doesn't know what's going on. And the end result is that just Harrison Ford explains everything he's doing. And the end result is, as to quote one review, a detective who does very little detecting because you just know what he's doing. His internal monologue the entire time.
Carl finishes his speech and waits for the other two to respond.
Yeah, that's the thing. But it makes it even funnier because Ford was reportedly really, really annoyed to do this. And a quote from him is that they dragged him in kicking and screaming. He didn't want to do it because obviously it directly conflicted with the director's vision for the film and the kind of film he thought he was making. Here's where it gets really, really good though. And this is where I have to add that allegedly, because Harrison Ford's line readings are so piss poor, it is rumoured that he did it badly on purpose so they wouldn't use them. And then they use them anyway. So what you get, and obviously there'll be some examples of his narration in clips now, it's so bad. He sounds like a fucking Jedi. Not emoting whatsoever. He sounds like he's reading it with a gun to his head.
Replicants weren't supposed to have feelings. Neither were Blade Runners. What the hell was happening to me?
Sounds like it's been read by Harrison Ford.
Basically, yeah. And Harrison Ford himself has repeatedly denied that he fucked them up on purpose so they wouldn't be used. And he says that, well, if you hear me I sound bored, I'm doing the best with the admittedly shitty material I could. And according to people who worked with Ford on the narration, he would have to cut between takes to laugh at how bad the narration is, or say the lines were shit as the person who wrote them was stood there watching. The script supervisor will be there going, "Can you read your lines, Mr. Ford?" It's no one could read these fucking lines, and the guy who wrote them stood there, which is similar to I think Star Wars, where I think he did the same thing to George Lucas. You heard this story?
No.
So on the set of Star Wars, Harrison Ford kept changing his lines, and George Lucas was like, "That's not what I wrote." Look, you can write these lines, but no actor can say them. So he just said what he wanted to.
Oh, I mean, he's got a point. Nobody told him not to write the prequel lines, and we heard all that in there.
Yeah, well, I think the point I've seen made about it is that George Lucas somehow got Samuel L. Jackson to give a bad performance.
The oppression of the Sith will never return. You have lost.
Oscar winner Samuel L. motherfucking Jackson gives a boring performance.
The number of people who are hype for Hayden Christensen to keep returning as Anakin.
Even though Hayden Christensen can't act, yeah.
I mean, maybe he can act.
What we never know, because all we ever see him doing is, "I hate sand."
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
He was good in Jumper. I liked him in Jumper.
Yeah, because he gets his ass kicked. He gets his ass kicked by Samuel L. Jackson. That's what I mean. You watch that film.
Oh god, he isn't that?
Yeah, you see the two actors interacting, and they're way more animated and having way more fun.
Who's protecting you? Give me an answer so I can go home. I hate jumpers.
Bring it back once again to Blade Runner. Again, Harrison Ford has soundly denied that he fucked up the line reading on purpose. Although I personally choose to believe that because it's much funnier that way, that he fucked it up on purpose expecting them not to use it, and then they use it and they end up with the worst version of the film possible. It's really hard to say one way or the other because in his own words, he's well, I was really grumpy that day. But that's Harrison Ford's default mood, so I don't know what to think.
Relatable.
But either way, it's still a very interesting story. So nearby, Brad and Nisha, have you thought about bad line readings? We mentioned Star Wars, and I watched the first episode of Ahsoka, and man, is that series hampered by the fact all the Jedi have to act like they did in the prequels. Because people don't know, George Lucas, every time someone tried to act and if they were a Jedi, you say, stop doing that. So what? Jedi do not show emotion. So Joe, when you have like Hayden Christensen delivering his lines, and you can see he's visibly pissed off. Well, there's multiple times in the prequels where he is visibly annoyed in the shot delivering his lines, but he's not supposed to be angry. That's because behind the scenes he'd try and give like some emotion, and then George Lucas say stop doing that.
It reminds me weirdly of when I used to do pantomimes when I was younger. The pantomime scripts were written by a guy who was like 70 or 80.
Yeah.
And I played the lead. And I remember one of the lines he wrote, the leading lady, and I was the leading guy, she said something like, I'll meet you in this place. And I had to say, oh, happy day.
Like, no one talks like that.
So old-fashioned.
No one talks like that.
The only time I've ever heard that said by anyone is in Batman Forever. Tommy Lee Jones says it as Two-Face. I've never heard it in any other context. So me as a I think I was 17, trying to deliver "Oh Happy Day."
It just it doesn't sound natural with your cadence.
That's what I hear when I hear the Star Wars lines. Of lines that just don't sound right.
So I'm watching Ahsoka, and it's like Rosario Dawson, fantastic actress. She doesn't have what's known as presence. So it's like you can be a good actor, but you might not have presence. And presence is just when an actor commands a scene.
Ray Winston in that show.
Yeah, and if you're thinking of a Star Wars example, think Qui-Gon Jinn. Liam Neeson has great presence. And I think he's the only one in the prequel trilogy who actually gets away with acting like really stoic and like calm. Because he just has that that charisma. He commands your attention when he talks.
Anakin will become a Jedi, I promise you.
Do not defy the Council, Master, not again.
I shall do what I must, Obi-Wan.
But then everyone else has to act like that, and none of them can. Like Rosario Dawson cannot. So I remember it was back and forth, very simple shot, reverse shot of her talking to her friend, and she's like, and this is the thing as well. Every fucking Jedi talks like this. Yes, interesting.
You're right. Just wish she had changed a little.
And that's it. And that's every single conversation in the show. And it's so fucking boring. It's so bad. And I'm watching it I feel so bad for these actors in this series. Because they'll never be able to escape it. Jedi have to act like this. They can't have fun. They can never emote. They can never do anything outside of just going, yes. Like Samuel Jackson. A Sith Lord? Where's the motherfucker? Imagine if they allowed. Can you think? Imagine how good Star Wars the prequels would have been if everyone was allowed to overact as much as Ian McDiarmid did. No, you because those films are based on Flash Gordon serials. George Lucas I love Flash Gordon serials. So why don't you let your actors act like they're in one? Why don't you let Samuel L. Jackson go full Samuel L. Jackson?
A Sith fucking Lord?
Yeah, in my Senate. And he doesn't. And just as a result, you have a show led by a character who by default cannot emote or act. And the entire show is supposed to hinge on you caring what they think. And it's let the actors have fun. On the show that's inspired by campy serials from the 60s.